Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Today, we are joined by Dr. Gregory Rogers, former US Air Force and NASA senior flight surgeon, and author of the compelling book, We've Got It From Them How Humanity Received ET Technology. Um, it's going to be a great show tonight. We've got lots of questions for him tonight as well. Let's start with the moment that changed everything. Can you take us back to 1992 at Cape Canaveral? What exactly did you witness? Hello?
Okay.
Yeah. Um, can you take us back to 1992 at Cape Canaveral? What exactly did you witness?
Okay. Well, I was going on an inspection of three different locations, and all of the buildings on Cape Canaveral are classified to some degree. So I had an EG&G escort with me. And so we were looking at what was going on in three different buildings with the space launch equipment and satellites that we were preparing to put into space. When I went into the third building, it seemed totally normal. Everything was fine. We came out of the clean room, and as we did so, that was the end of what the escort was going to do for me. So he just said, "Okay, Doc, see you later. We'll get together next time." So I finished taking off the little hat that I wore, special coat, um, the gloves, and these non-electrostatic booties that I had on. And so I was perhaps just a minute behind him. As I left um, that little preparation room, I went out into the hallway, and there was a major who recognized me, and he said, "Hey, Doc." And I said, "Hey, everybody knows the flight surgeon, but when there's 1,800 people, I don't necessarily remember who they are." But he came over to me and said, "I've got something to," and he did this. "I've got something to show you that even you have never seen." So I said, "Well, okay, show it to me." Well, he acted kind of funny. He took me into the office that was right beside him. He shut and locked the door, and then he closed the louvered blinds leading out that looked out into the hallway. He went over to his computer station. He turned on his computer and his console, worked for a couple of minutes, and then this video came on. And so he said, this is it. You got to see this. So he scooted one seat over to our left, and I then moved into the seat where he was sitting. What I saw was a closed circuit television feed from what appeared to be just a typical military hangar. There were a couple of guys on the left side, three guys on the right side. Everything looked totally normal to me. It looked like I was looking out at my own hangar, except for what was in the hangar. There was a saucer shaped craft that was about 20 feet in width. It was pearly white. It had no seams, no rivets, no pitot tube, no control surface, nothing that looked like any type of flight control surfaces. So, I was shocked by that. Now then, this appeared to me immediately to be a test craft because along the beam from the 1230 to 230 position, 230 to or 330 to 530 position, and then later I saw at the 630 to 830 position and 930 to 1130 position, there were large horizontal black rectangles. Now, the reason you put these on experimental craft is so that when they move, you can tell exactly how they're moving. Now, then on the upper part of the craft, at the 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock positions, there were vertical black rectangles put there for the same reason. And so I'm looking at this thing and I'm really surprised. I said, you know, who would make something like this? And the guy said, well, I can't tell you that. And I said, well, why would we do this? And this is exactly what he did, which is why I put the name on my book that I did. He said,
Yeah.
we got it from them.
Ah,
So, okay, well, that's not complicated. We got it from the people who came from outer space. Okay, I understand that. Now then, as the vehicle activated and began to move, I was very surprised to see something else. At the 12 o'clock position, as it rotated, I noticed that the markings said U.S. Air Force, and there was an American flight insignia just above that. So that shocked me even more. So now I'm thinking, oh, okay, man, this has got to be a reverse engineered spacecraft that that we're testing. It's got to be based on an actual UAP, but I'm sitting here watching it as it operates. So it rotated 360 degrees clockwise, 360 degrees counterclockwise. It moved left, then to the right, forward and back, just as though you're testing the controls of the spacecraft. On top of it, there was a small dome, and there was a mast that protruded from that. The mast was attached to 3 umbilical hoses. I would imagine one of them was probably electrical power. The other 2, I would assume, was some sort of control mechanisms. But I assume that they were how the control of this experimental vehicle was being operated. Well, then I saw this thing do something truly amazing. It had been sitting like this, just as still as could be, and all of a sudden, the nose where it said U.S. Air Force rose to 45 degrees and then remained completely stationary. Now, I got my solo certificate in helicopters, and I flew T-37 supersonic T-38s and also F-16s. So I know all about aerodynamics and how flight controls operate and propulsion systems and all of these kind of things. Well, what I saw from this craft was something that was totally and completely impossible for all human-made craft to do. There is nothing that we owned in 1992 that could perform this. You know, I was working with the space shuttle. I was working with some of the most advanced technology in the world, and there was nothing to compare to this. So I was completely shocked when I saw this. Well, to make a long story short, I did not tell this story for 33 years. When I finally retired from the military earlier this year, I told the story for the first time. You can see that I'm in the International UFO Bureau.
yeah.
They are a long-standing UFO research center. In fact, Jimmy Carter, the former president of the United States, saw a UFO, and he decided, well, I'm going to report this. And of all of the places he could have reported it, he reported it to the International UFO Bureau in Oklahoma City. So I'm proud to say that I'm a board member of that. But after I came forward in May of this year with this information, I was really shocked by the way this thing blew up all over the world. Just this week, I made a post about Three Eye Atlas, and then another one on TikTok, because I was so shocked about what happened with the Three Eye Atlas one. But it appears that there's been over 1 million people watching this TikTok video about the Three Eye Atlas and my experience at Cape Canaveral. I have been on podcasts literally all over the world. Right now it looks like I'm speaking to the United Kingdom.
You are?
In fact, where are you specifically located?
I'm in Bridlington in North Yorkshire on the North Yorkshire coast.
Okay, so there's another location. I've spoken to New Zealand, Australia, South America, several times in Argentina, Chile, Peru, South Africa, Spain, literally all over the world. So millions of people have heard this story, and I'm glad that it's making a difference. Just this last Friday, I was on a show called Gary Anderson's Night Dreams Network, and there were two people who were there. The first was Mr. Timothy Phillips, who has a very distinguished record in the U.S. military, but he was the deputy director of Aero, and so he was invited to go on and speak for the first hour, and then I was going to be invited on for the second hour. And so during his hour, he explained what Aero is doing, why they're doing it. But as he kept talking and talking and talking, it just seemed to me that he was giving an updated version of everything that was said during Project Blue Book. And so his conclusion was there are no UAPs, there are no reverse engineered craft that the United States has in its inventory or has ever created. Well, he got through with his talk, and so Gary Anderson got me on, and one of the first things he said is, do you believe that we have reverse engineered spacecraft? And I said, well, yeah, I would have to disagree with him. And the reason is because I saw one of them. So that immediately set the tone for the rest of the conversation.
I bet it did as well.
I think it is just amazing when people who are speaking for the government. Now, then I understand when I was in the government, I was sometimes told, okay, here's what you're going to do, and here's what you're going to tell people that you did when it's over. And so there were lots of times that I did not tell people exactly what I was doing, because what I was doing was important, but we needed to control that information. So there's lots of reasons that the United States government performs these things. But when it comes to UAPs, UFOs, it's like they're trying to hide the cat out of the bag 5,000 years after it already happened. When we go back to ancient India, when we go to the American Southwest, when we go to Peru, the Incas, the Mayans, the Assyrians, we go to the Bible. No matter where we look in the world, there have been people in the past who said, we are seeing UFOs. Now, they didn't describe them as UFOs. They used all kinds of different terminology. But what they were describing was the same stuff that we're seeing now. They drew pictures of what they saw, and their pictures look like the pictures that we're drawing. So it seems like it is absolutely ridiculous for the governments of the world to pretend There's no such thing as a UAP. I have commented to many, many, many people. It's already too late. The world knows that UAPs are real. The government is going to deny them. And all of the people who have seen them, witnessed them, we take photographs of them. Ryan Graves and David Fravor were flying FA-18 Super Hornets. Now, these are some of the most advanced aircraft in the world. On the videos in both visible light and infrared, forward-looking infrared, and on the radar signatures of accompanying naval vessels, we saw them. We saw what they were doing. We know how they behaved. And yet we still have the government saying, no, there's nothing to see here. Well, there is something to see here. We've already seen it. Millions of people around the world have seen it with their own eyes. And yet the governments of the world are saying, no, it's not true. You can't believe what has happened. Well, I think those days are gone.
Exactly. Are there specific inventions or breakthrough you believe were influenced by ET contact?
I think that there are. One of the things that I had the privilege of doing was working with the astronauts. I was the chief of aerospace medicine at Cape Canaveral, and the chief of aerospace medicine for the 45th Space Wing. I worked with astronauts. I worked with scientists. I worked with actual rocket scientists, astrophysicists. I actually drove a nuclear submarine, flew F-16s. I have worked with people from all over the world, and I have heard too many stories that are consistent. Now, then, one of the problems is that it basically doesn't matter what government you're dealing with, because I've spoken to British personnel and people from the United States, and if you hold an official press conference, they will say, "No, I never saw anything." Then you go out for dinner. You're sitting there eating, you have a couple of brewskis, and all of a sudden they say, "Hey, let me tell you what happened on my first mission." And then they tell the real story. But then when they go back to work the next day, they will say, "No, we never had these experiences." The truth of the matter is, many, many people in all kinds of walks of life, in all kinds of technical industries, in all types of military settings, have seen these things. They know they're real. They have monitored what was going on with them. And yet, because of the way our governments are running control of the news, we're keep getting the official statements that there are no UAPs, there are no reverse engineered craft, there's nothing to see. Everything that you think you've seen, you've imagined. That is just ridiculous. It's 2025. They have been doing this for years and years and years and years. They can't say, yes, we know you just saw a UAP fly over a sensitive military area, but it was only swamp gas. Just a short time ago, we had unidentified aerial phenomena flying over Langley Air Force Base for several nights in a row. We could not identify the craft. We could not identify where they were coming from. We could not identify what they were doing. And for the safety of the F-22s that were stationed there, the most advanced air-to-air fighters in the world, because we could not control the airspace over Langley Air Force Base, we moved the F-22s to protect them. Now, if we can't even protect Langley Air Force Base, one of the most advanced Air Force bases that we have, how are you going to convince me that this is not true? We just had to shift the location of our best air-to-air fighters because we cannot control the airspace. It makes no sense to continue to deny that this is happening because we're watching it happen right in front of our eyes.
Exactly. How do you respond to skeptics who say this is science fiction?
Well, one of the comments I've had was that in 1972 there was science fiction because NASA said we're going to make a reusable spacecraft, and we're going to construct it so that it can perform missions time after time after time after time. At the time, that was science fiction. Well, the work that they created was known as the space shuttle. In 1981, it was no longer science fiction. It became science fact. And we flew over 100 missions with the space shuttle. I supported 31 space shuttle missions myself. What was science fiction in 1972 was science fact. And I could stand at Kennedy Space Center at the shuttle landing facility, 3.5 miles from the launch site, and watch as the space shuttle main engines ignited, and then the solid rocket boosters ignited. And I watched that vehicle with 7 souls aboard launch and go into space. Now, that was science fiction in 1972, but it was science fact in 1989, 1990, 1991, through 1995, when I was supporting space shuttle operations. So things that often start off as science fiction often become science fact. Jules Verne wrote, a science fiction book about going to the moon. In 1969, we went to the moon. I have met Buzz Aldrin, and he's a wonderful guy. He and I actually had a book signing together, and we spoke off and on for quite some time, and he's a wonderful guy. He went to the moon. One of the things I don't think people realized was that Neil Armstrong was the first one to walk on the moon. But Buzz Aldrin actually saved their lives. When they came back into the lunar module, one of the control mechanisms had been broken, and it was the ignition switch to the ascent engine that was supposed to lift off from the moon and carry them back to the Apollo 11 command module. Well, when they looked at it, they said, what are we going to do? I don't think we had any workarounds for this. So the NASA managers on Earth were trying to figure it out. Well, Buzz Aldrin ended up saying, hey, I think I figured it out. I can take my ballpoint pen and, I will loosen the housing on that. And I think I can get my pen back to the circuit breaker. And when it's time for the engine to ignite, I will push my pin in to close that circuit. And if I can close that circuit, the engine will ignite and we will leave the moon. So as they're counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, he's sitting there with his pin waiting to see if he can close that circuit. And when they get to 0, he closes the circuit. The engine ignites Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin fly back to the Apollo 11 command module, and they come back to Earth and are greeted as heroes. Well, Neil Armstrong put his foot down on the moon first, but it was Buzz Aldrin that got him back from the moon safely. So, I think both men are deserving of a tremendous amount of notoriety as history reviews what those two men accomplished.
Yeah. Do you believe there is an active government cover-up then?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Because there is. I know that there is. I can't go into details, but the cover-up is there.
Let's talk about the bigger picture. What does this mean for humanity in the future?
Well, I think it's not just humanity in the future, it's humanity in the past and humanity of who we are now. I think there have been visitors to this earth since the earliest humanity. If you go back to the Bible, there were watchers in Genesis chapter 6 who came down, and they were supposed to be watching for the safety of humans, but instead they said, hey, those girls are pretty, and they had sexual activity with the daughters of men, and guess what? They produced hybrid beings, and these hybrid beings were evil. And so when people talk today, well, do you think that there could be actual interactions between non-human intelligences and people? Well, yes, the Bible said there was, all the way back in chapter 6. Could there be hybrids because of this activity? Yes, the Bible said so in chapter Genesis 6. You look at other texts around the world, and most all of the major religions and minor religions from all of the different kinds of people, it doesn't matter what continent it was, they all have ancient stories of the gods who came down from space to teach them things and to help their societies promote. Well, this has been going on for thousands of years. As we see these same UAPs, and we capture video of them on the F-18 Super Hornets, and we capture radar images of the same thing. This is not something that is unique to our age. This has been going on throughout the course of humanity. And as humanity has developed, these beings have played a role in who we have become and how we got here. So to think that there's suddenly going to be no effect from UAPs and non-human intelligences as we develop into our future, I think is extremely naive and against the historical precedent.
Do you believe we are ready for open contact with extraterrestrial beings?
I believe we are, but I can say that because I was born, and I would suspect you were also, in the age of the nuclear bomb. As a kid, I can remember watching videos in school teaching us to duck and cover if there was a nuclear weapon going off, as though if we ducked our heads, covered our heads, and hid under our desk, this is going to somehow protect us from the detonation of a nuclear weapon. Well, as I became a military officer and at one point, I was the nuclear, biological, and chemical medical officer for the 3rd Infantry Division in West Germany. I came to realize this was garbage. This was just public relations to make people not feel so vulnerable. If a thermonuclear weapon went off anywhere near that school, ducking our head and covering under our desks were not going to protect us. But I was raised under the specter of nuclear annihilation. I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, when it seemed like we were about to destroy the entire human race. But we handled it. The world did not fall apart. The human beings were able to react to this and continue to thrive. If somebody came out now and showed us that, yes, we have been guided by non-human intelligences all along, well, if you believe the Bible, if you believe the Quran, if you believe most of the major religions, we've believed that all along. We knew that we did not come up with all of this stuff. There were angels and extraterrestrials that were guiding us. Now, angels were not born on this earth. So by definition, every time the Bible mentions an angel, they are mentioning an extraterrestrial. So this has been going on since the earliest times of our civilization. So yes, we've been ready for this. Now, we don't know what's going to happen and why there have been delays, but there's no telling what all is going on behind the scenes. And what is going on behind the scenes is why the governments are lying to us. Something is happening that they don't want us to know about.
How do you think they would handle it if the aliens decided to show themselves before they told us the full story?
Well, if the non-human intelligences decided to show themselves to the people of the world, there is nothing the government could do to stop them. Like I mentioned a while ago, they were flying over Langley Air Force Base, and we could not protect our own fighters. We could not protect our own airspace. If they had wanted to do something to us, they could have done it at any time they want, and there wasn't a thing anyone human could have done about it. So it's hard for governments who are responsible for national security to admit we have no control over this. We are not in control of our airspace. You are the people of our nation, and yet we cannot control your safety. Someone else is in control. And that's where the problems lie.
I know when briefly we talked about going to the moon. When they're on the moon, did they see anything else on the moon? I know they landed on the moon and walked on the moon. Did they see any alien craft or buildings or anything?
I will have to leave that to the people who went to the moon to address that. And, I have met several of them, and I know what I have been told, but I know that they are the only ones who actually set foot on the moon, who saw what was on the moon, and have reported what's on the moon. So their reports are going to have to stand alone. So at this point, I'm not going to make any additional comments about that.
That's fine. What inspired you to write the book? Tell us a little bit how you got into writing it.
Well, I wrote the book because after I told my story, it went worldwide. Newsweek magazine wrote a story about it. The UK Daily Mail wrote a story about it. The New York Post wrote a story about it. it it was being told all over the world. But a lot of times when reporters start saying this is what Dr. Greg Rogers said, they're not getting it accurate. So I decided, I'm just going to write my own book and tell the story my way, so that I make sure it gets out. And there are a lot of things that I told that go beyond uh, just my experience with seeing one reverse engineered spacecraft being tested. I also included a lot of information about my background as a military officer. And then toward the end of it, I wrote something that was very important to me. As a physician, I have treated military personnel over the last 40 years. One of the most difficult things to deal with is PTSD. Well, I decided to address this myself because when David Grush came forward, people tried to make all kinds of stuff about that, and other people as well. So I just came straight out and said, look, I have PTSD, but here's what PTSD means. It is not a sign of weakness. And so I actually went through and discussed some of the methods of treatment and why it's important for people with PTSD to get treated. So even though it's in a UAP book, as a doctor, I felt like I needed to put that out. So I have included other information that I feel is important.
Yeah, exactly. I know people will say, you should have asked this question before. What was your role at NASA?
I was the chief of aerospace medicine for the 45th Space Wing. So I was responsible for the flight medicine program, the military public health, the bioenvironmental engineering. I had to oversee the contracts that the military medical aspects of the military contracts at Cape Canaveral. And then through DDMS, the Department of Defense Manned Spaceflight Support Office, I was also tasked to support space shuttle operations out of Kennedy Space Center. So I was on the astronaut rescue and recovery team for launches and landings whenever crews were in the space shuttle. If they crashed or had some other adverse event, my helicopter and my crews were supposed to go in and rescue them, and then we would provide treatment as we transported them to the local hospitals so that they could get whatever surgery or anything else was to be done. But it was my job to save their lives. And that's what I was trained to do. I actually wrote 2 of the 3 documents training military flight surgeons how to support space shuttle operations. That included the Transoceanic Abort Landing Site Supplement and also the Kennedy Space Center Supplement. And so I was giving instructions to other Department of Defense flight surgeons for how to support space shuttle operations and hopefully save the lives of the astronauts if there were circumstances in which we could do so.
And I'm sure without your help and technology, what a great man you are. What was the most challenging part of telling your story?
Well, initially coming out and having people listening to me was difficult because the first thing most people do is say, well, if you waited 33 years, why are you telling it now? The second biggest thing is that as I have told my story, there have been activities and actions that have been used against me to try to defeat my story. When I was writing my book, the publisher contacted me one day and said, Greg, you're going to have to send me a new copy of your manuscript. everything on my computer about your story just disappeared. It was completely deleted. Everything else is intact, but your story is gone. So I said, okay, I'll just send you a copy from my computer. So I got on my computer and it was gone from my computer.
Oh,
However, I had saved copies of it on 5
backups.
different thumb drives. So I
Brilliant.
took one of my thumb drives and loaded it up, gave it to her at Unex Media, and because of all of the stuff that was going on, we were originally going to publish it on the 22nd of September. Because of the fear of what was happening to us, it was actually published on the 21st of August. And I've had continued detrimental events happen that have tried to quiet this story, and yet here I am still telling it.
Have you ever had been followed, or have you had warnings?
Um, I, I, I don't want to answer that question.
That's fine. What do you hope readers take away from it, from your book?
These things are real. They have been real. They are real. They're going to be real. And I want people to know the truth. So the I called the book "We Got It From Them." It wasn't hard to figure out because when I said, "Where did we get this?" the guy said, "Well, we got it from them." Okay, there's the title of the book. We got it from them. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, Google Books, wherever you look. But it's the truth. People need to know it, and
Have you
that's
ever
why I wrote it.
sorry to interrupt him. Have you ever had your own sightings of UFOs then?
Um, Aside from the flying saucer that I saw being tested, I have not seen one during the course of my activities.
Yeah, I have. I've seen.
Well, I know plenty of people who have.
Oh yeah, I suppose it. People get. I'm saying myself, people get chosen to see things.
Well, there's something just about human beings in general. If we're walking along the beach and we find a really pretty shell, we're going to pick it up, look at it, and say, "Hey, look, everybody, look at the shell I found." We like to share the things that happen to us. When something as bizarre as seeing a UAP, a UFO happens right in front of us, we're going to want to tell those stories too. It's just human nature. The only problem is that, especially in the military, it's suppressed. In 1992, there was no way I was going to tell anyone I had just seen a flying saucer, because if I did, that would have been the end of my career right there. And
Yeah,
that's why I waited until after I retired 33 years later before I ever told this story.
yeah, because there's people in the past. There's been people gone missing. They've had
Yeah,
the pension stopped.
yeah,
Disowned.
there's all kinds of stories.
It's terrible, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Um, yeah, it's been a fascinating story today listening to you. Are you working on a follow-up or related projects?
Well, right now I've got just all kinds of things coming at me from every direction. I may have mentioned, but on Sunday, I just made a TikTok comment about the metallic contents of the 3I Atlas and why I found them anomalous, and why I felt like the truth about the chemistry of 3I Atlas needs to be told. And next thing I know, it looks like we're going to pass 1 million views just about what I said of the metal content of the 3i Atlas. So I just never know what's going to happen next. All of this is a big surprise to me.
Is that going to come to Earth then?
3i Atlas is going to exit the solar system, never to return. So it's a once event. It's in a hyperbolic course. It's not going to come back to the Earth.
I thought so. People, because there's too many stories out there and people get frightened, think it's going to land in the North Sea, in fact.
Well, there's lots of people who want to scare people. There are people who write novels of untrue things, and they want to scare people. Guess what? Well, they make money off that. Well, there are people on the internet making money off lying to people. So there's going to be lots of that stuff going on. Humans are going to be humans are going to be humans. So we are what we are.
Do you think we'll ever get disclosure then?
Only if the non-human intelligences decide to disclose it. So, I can't predict that. I believe that God created the heavens and the earth, and that God creates all things. So, in my mind, God is even in control of the aliens. And so nothing is going to happen without his will allowing it.
Do you think we are part alien?
Well, the Bible says that the gods got together and said, let us make man after our own image. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but that means that we have been made in the image of God. I will leave it at that. Only God knows what that really means. So, I'm not going to add anything to what the Bible says about that.
Do you think aliens have been to Earth once before in the past?
I think they've been to the Earth many, 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 many times. I think it's recorded in the Bible, in the Vedic texts, in the Inca stories, the Mayan legends. History is replete with the stories of mankind who have seen UAPs and non-human intelligences and have interacted with them. So it's crazy to think that our modern governments are going to tell us all of those people from all of those generations of all of those years were all wrong. Don't believe them, believe us. So, that's where I'll leave this story. But I appreciate you having me on.
One more thing before we go, anyway.
Okay.
Do you think we'll ever go back to the moon then?
Oh, I think we'll go back to the moon. The only problem is it costs a lot of money to do that. And when you see everything that we are spending money on, it's hard to scrape up enough money to go do that. We scraped up enough money in 1969 to do it. We could have done it in 1980, except it would have been so expensive that no one felt like it's worth spending all of the money. I mean, we were trying to build the internet. We were trying to build new and better computers. Who's going to take the money away from all of that and say, no, let's go back and spend it to go to the moon again? We had Apollo 18 that was ready to go, but they just said, man, it costs so much. We're not going to send that last crew to the moon. We're just not going to spend the money. So it's not a matter of technology. We had the ability to send Apollo 18 back to the moon, but we we didn't want to spend the money. And so that's where we are now. If the whole world decided we want to go to the moon, and it doesn't matter how much money we spend to do it, we could do it.
I know.
The only thing is, it would cause an economic recession around the world. So that's why we haven't done it yet.
I know China's were on about going back to they wanted to go to the moon.
Well, they do, but it costs money. So let's see if the Chinese economy can actually scrape up the money to do everything else they want to do for their people, and also send a mission to the moon. So thank you very much.
India, another place. India's got poverty, but they wanted to put a shuttle to the moon.
Well, we have the technology. Anyone who has enough money can spend the technology to go to the moon. It's just going to cost you 2 arms and 2 legs to do it, and that's what has held it back. So I thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again for joining us today, Dr. Gregory Rogers, author from the book. Got to think about origins in our technology and boundaries of human knowledge. Well, thank you again for so much. We'll just ask you again, where can people get your book?
You go on the internet, you look at Amazon, you look at Google Books, Barnes and Noble. You just type in Dr. Gregory Rogers. We got it from them book, and you'll find it on the internet.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds a very interesting book. And,
okay.
But thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been very exciting, and I'm sure the listeners all around the world will be listening to the show later on. Will find it very fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again.